Greetings and welcome to Let's Talk About Books, baby, where we talk with your favorite LGBTQ author. I'm Anita Kelly, and my guest today is Anne Laughlin. Hello, Anne.
Hi, Anita. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Great. Really happy to be here.
Great. I just want to, did I pronounce your name right?
Well, it's actually Laughlin, like,
Laughlin.
but the
Okay.
hard, the GH is hard,
Okay.
but no one gets that, so it's most commonly called Laughlin.
Sorry about that.
No, that's quite all right.
I should know better.
I don't
being
know why.
being a good Celtic person.
Oh, right, right.
So yeah, so Anne, let's talk about your new release called Clean Kill. I had to tell
Yes,
you, I read this book and I loved it. I really did. It was great. I did not put it down. So,
wonderful.
can you give us a little synopsis? Tell us what it's about.
Sure. Clean Kill is about the protagonist's name is Nikki Sullivan, and she is a woman in recovery whose job used to be a homicide detective with the Chicago Police Department, and now she is the resident manager of a sober living home that 10 newly sober women live in. So Nikki has been through a little journey, leaving the police department and entering into recovery. And so she tries to help the 10 women in recovery to grasp sobriety and, help them on their way. Then, unfortunately, one of the residents is murdered. And Nikki, being a former homicide cop, immediately wants to investigate, and she connects with her old police partner and his new partner, and the three of them start the investigation. And soon, other women in recovery are murdered, and it turns out that all of them have some kind of connection to Nikki. So she's not only investigating, she's right in the middle of the investigation herself. Yeah, so it's a serial killer novel, and it's also a novel about recovery.
Okay. So, let's talk a little bit about a couple of those things. So, what is the significance of the title Clean Kill? I think I can surmise, but you tell us.
Yeah, well, it was originally titled Olive Street House, which is the name of the sober living home. And I love that title, but I was advised correctly that it didn't sound like a mystery novel. So we went for something that referenced recovery in some way, but also referenced murder. It's a murder mystery. So Clean Kill is what a friend of mine came up with. And I thought it was really good.
Yeah, it's very clever. I like it. It didn't
Hmm.
dawn on me till I was probably halfway through the book. Ah, I get it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was great. So, tell us a little bit more about Nikki Sullivan. Right, she is an ex homicide detective. Um, what is what is a recovery house?
Well, she's the resident manager of a house that is owned by a large company that owns various rehab facilities and what used to be called halfway houses. And so she is an employee of this company. And she came to that after a very successful career as a homicide detective, but she was also a really intense drinker, and she spent most of her free hours in cop bars and other bars. And this eventually caught up to her. She also, during one incident, there was a very unfortunate accident where a shot she fired accidentally harmed somebody fairly severely. And the guilt from that, compounded with her bottoming out on alcohol, led her to leave the police department, which was a huge part of her identity. So leaving the department and then going into rehab meant her life changed 100%. She everything she knew was now different. So she's been 5 years sober. She's working in this house. She's helping people get sober, which helps her stay sober. But her personal life still is wanting. I mean, she has kept herself separate. She hasn't had any romantic relationship in that 5 years. She just the beginning of the book, she has sex for the first time as a sober person. So there's a lot of vulnerability to Nikki. She wants to prove herself. She wants to um, make up for her sins of the past, and she just kind of gropes her way through that.
Did you do a lot of character development before you started writing this, or did Nikki kind of just evolve as you wrote
Mm.
it?
I would say Nikki evolved, and um, because she had two main identities. The one is a drinker and then a recovering person, then another is a cop. The challenge was to meld them together into an interesting whole. And I just did that, as I wrote. And the great thing about writing is rewriting. So by the time you get to the end of a novel, you can go back to the front of the novel and realize, oh, Nikki is a little different here in the front than she is at the end. So let me do some rewriting here to conform the character.
Uh,
Um, so I don't do a lot of upfront work like writing character sketches, though I have with the new book I'm writing. I did do a new practice, which I thought was really interesting, which is to write a diary as if you were that character. So writing, straight from the heart and writing all the hard stuff in a journal. And as I'm doing that, it reveals to me, the writer, more about her character.
that's pretty cool. That is a great idea. I
Yeah,
like
I don't
that.
know where I got that idea. It's not original to me, but it really worked.
Yeah, I'll bet. I'll bet.
Mhm.
Like you're just kind of encompassing a whole nother being, you know?
Yeah, it's a little creepy, maybe,
Yeah.
in the sense that, I'm actually doing the writing, but as I'm writing, I can feel the character assert herself. Um, and, I'm not one of those writers who think things like, oh, the character just told me what to say, or the character told me what they were going to do. I think, no, I told them what to say and I tell them what to do. But there's no question, as you get to know a character better, um, you're more attuned to what they probably would say and do. And in that sense, you're staying true to the character.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll bet. Yeah, that makes sense. And
Hmm.
Nikki, I really liked her. Like she was well developed. Um I'm in recovery myself, so you know, just like she was genuine. She just seemed genuine to me. Um
Good.
yeah, yeah, that was great. You did a great job with her. So,
Oh, thank you.
have we met Nikki before?
No, Nikki is brand new.
Okay. All right.
And it's the first novel of what ostensibly will be a series.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that. I had seen something that said book 1 in the
Yeah,
Nikki
Nikki Sullivan.
series. Yeah. So there'll be more.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm working on something quite different right now, but the intention is I would get back to Nikki Sullivan and write another mystery. She becomes a private investigator at the end of the book, which opens the door for more adventures for Nikki
Cool.
and her sidekicks.
Forget, did she leave the recovery house then?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, uh, voluntarily. I think for all of us in recovery, there are stages, and this job really served her well in her early years of recovery and gave her something that genuinely helped other people. But at a certain point, the lousy pay and the constant headaches, it was time for Nikki to move on.
And she has all these mad investigative skills that were just going to waste.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you want to keep those sharp.
Yeah. So, how do the rest of the like police force, like she calls her old partner and he has a new partner. What role do they all play in Nikki's story?
Yeah. Well, her ex-partner as a homicide cop was a man named Quinn. And he, like a lot of partners, he had her back. And even during the worst of her drinking and crazy behavior, he stuck with her. And she never got hold of him after she got sober because she was so pretty much mortified by the way she had acted in the last year or two of her drinking and was too embarrassed to get hold of him. But when this murder occurs, she has plenty of motivation for getting hold of him again and getting some help from the police force. So he very willingly helps her out. It's kind of ex officio because she's not on the police force anymore. And so whatever she's doing is outside the bounds of the police investigation. But he has a new partner, and her name is Joanne Parker, and everyone calls her Parker. And of course, she's very beautiful and just an intriguing character, very self assured and confident. And, she speaks in a way that you can feel her concern, but she's also she's a professional. She knows herself, and it all comes across in the way she speaks. So Nikki, of course, immediately feels attracted to her, and Parker plays an important role in the investigation and in Nikki's life. So Parker and Quinn are probably the second and third main characters in the book.
Okay. Wow. And are we going to and I don't know if you can tell us this or not, but in the second book, are we going to see more of Parker?
Oh yeah.
All right.
Parker, yes, yes, yes. Parker will stay around.
Okay. All
At
right.
least for part of the book. We don't know what's going to happen to them,
You
but
never know.
you never know. But yeah, she'll be around. I actually like Parker a lot. I liked that character. I liked writing the character. And she was kind of like somebody I'd like to be type of person.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. That's fun.
Mhm.
That is really fun.
Whereas Nikki's probably more like me in the sense of, any self-doubt or fumbling around or just getting better through recovery.
Mhm.
As a person who's got many years in recovery myself, I can still put myself back to those early years and remember how uh, befuddling everything still was. It just takes a little while to start sorting things out and being able to make good decisions.
Yeah, they say, like your first 5 years are really developmental years for
Yes,
you.
that's right.
Yeah.
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 So,
They say in recovery that you're not supposed to get involved with anyone during the first year of your recovery.
mhm.
And I sometimes think it probably should be 5 years, but no one's going to wait that long. But it
True.
really takes that long took me that long before I was able to be in a real adult relationship.
Yeah, yeah. I think it took that long for me just to like grow up.
Exactly.
you know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're coming into it pretty raw.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing. And
Hmm.
I started drinking and using prepubescent, so
Yeah.
I had a long way to go. um
Yeah. And, it means that compared to non-alcoholics and addicts, there's a whole swath of life that the alcoholic didn't experience or experienced in such a fog and haze that it almost didn't count as most adults develop during their 20s and into their 30s, and certainly during their teenage years, that is all halted when you're drinking alcoholically. You're not growing in that way.
No.
So
And even if
yeah.
you do remember, like the feelings are still like stunted, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's like you're emotionally like thwarted, like you just can't uh express or even
Right.
feel the depth of what maybe someone who wasn't engaging in
Yeah.
substances would, you know.
Yeah. So you're not as able to be a good partner.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So I have to ask you, I think I've read all of your books. And I want to know, how do you decide how to kill somebody and who is going to get killed off? Like, do you know that going in? And how do you
Hmm.
decide how they're going to get the axe?
Yeah. Well, with this one, I knew to kick off the murder mystery part of the book that somebody would die early on. And I identified that character, and I hated killing her because I really liked that character. But she would be the model for all of the rest of the ones who were murdered as well. So this, it's kind of gruesome because it's a serial killer story, and there are at least four bodies involved. Um, but I would say, as I was developing the story, meaning I'm not as much, there's the old, are you a plotter or are you a pantster? I'm more like a plantster. So I know I know five or six scenes ahead of me. I know where I'm going, and then I write another little synopsis of five or six scenes ahead of that. So I don't outline the whole book. For this one, I didn't. So the it just kind of comes up. It comes up organically from the story. Like, okay, now I have to have another victim who would be somebody who would have some connection to Nikki's life, um, and would be an interesting next murder victim. And I just kind of make it up from there.
Okay, all right. Um, Sometimes I've always told Allie Valley she scares me with her devil series.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, there's some torture going on in there, and it's like,
yeah,
what
she's
goes on in your mind, you know?
right. Yeah, she can be pretty right into it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it's like Val McDermid, the very well-known and great mystery writer from Scotland, and her first book, um, the Wired in the Blood, I think it is. She had it. I mean, she had torture in there like you wouldn't believe. I mean, it was awful, and yet the book took off, and it really was a good book. It was just hard to read, and I don't think I would ever go there. I don't think I have the capacity for it. Yeah, I wouldn't enjoy writing it, and I don't think anyone enjoys reading it really.
No.
And if they do, I don't want to know about them.
Yeah, right. I
Yeah,
know that kind of stuff causes me great anxiety. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
oh yeah,
yeah. I'm reading a book right now, and it goes back and forth between time, and it's back to like the slave days, and it just causes me anxiety. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
I know what's gonna happen. I don't want to read this.
yeah.
Like,
I have a hard time that way as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, when and if we talk about the book I'm working on now, there are some interesting things that relate to that.
Okay. Well,
Mm,
do you want to jump in and uh talk about
sure,
what
I
you're?
could talk
Yeah.
about. Yeah, I could talk about it. It's a novel. I have finished the third draft of it, so it's a completed story. And it's my first foray into historical fiction. So it is not a crime novel, which is a big departure for me. And I have to say, so far, a happy one. I've really enjoyed writing this book, but it's called Sparrow's Nest, and it is set in Berlin in both 1929 And then after Hitler takes power in 1933, and my main character, Marty, is just she lives in Chicago. She's just figuring out that she's a lesbian, and she marries a gay guy and moves to Berlin for him to have a kind of a cover there, and for her to be able to live in Berlin freely and go to the university there and just have her own kind of cover. And while she's there, the 1920s in Berlin was, queer heaven. It was unbelievable. There were, in 1929, there were, I've read different figures, 50 to 80 lesbian bars in the city of Berlin. I
Wow.
mean, that just boggles the mind.
Yeah.
Everything from working class bars by the Alexanderplatz to, very high end ones that Marlene Dietrich would go to. And so the first part of the book explores a little bit about her discovering her lesbianism, expanding her community, finding out what it's all about as she is noticing the growth of the Nazi Party and some ominous tones, to that. And then the second part of the book, which is longer than the first, Marty is the head of a resistance group called Sparrow's Nest. And that whole section of the book has to do with her, various missions and actions in opposition to the Third Reich and all the dangers of that. Plus, there's a love story in there that spans from the first part into the second part, and a lot of different things happen. But that's the main gist: is the resistance.
Wow, that is really cool. That really is. You put
Yeah, I I'm really excited about the book.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy reading it, which is not always the case,
Yeah.
I yeah, so
Yeah,
it's
especially after three drafts, right?
yeah, right. And I'm sure there will be a fourth and fifth, but I have a very rigorous writing group. It's only three of us, but the other two they're literary writers, they're MFAs, they're well schooled in book doctoring. And so when they get through, workshopping my novel, I usually have a really good game plan for how to make the book better. Just so happened that this last go around, it meant a massive rewriting of the second part of the book. And I don't take everything that they say blindly, but what they said in this case made a lot of sense. So I went through the trouble of changing it, and it's a better book.
Wow. That's nice to have that kind of support.
Oh my God. I mean, honestly, for the advice that they give me, people pay thousands of dollars for,
Yeah.
and I'm just very fortunate to have them as good friends and writing cohorts.
Yeah, that's amazing. That really is. Yeah.
Hmm.
It almost Sparrow's Nest almost sounds like a historical thriller. Like,
Yeah, I would call it more a historical thriller.
yeah,
Yes, that's a good thing. Yeah.
yeah, that's really cool. I think my wife would like that. She loves uh, historical fiction and especially around that time, that era in
Yeah.
Germany. Yeah,
Well, I don't think you can ever go wrong writing about the World War II era
yeah,
because it's endlessly fascinating to people and books come out all the time. I was a little worried that there was too much about women in the resistance because there's been quite a few books coming out about that. But you can't time the market. It's like trying to time the stock market. You
yeah.
can't time the publishing market either. And if you do, you're just going to be miserable. So I'll just, keep the faith that it's a good enough book that people will enjoy it.
Oh, I'm sure they will. So, did you have to do a lot of research for this, or did you know a lot already?
Well, I knew a fair amount, but I did a massive amount of research, both into Berlin during the 20s with the kind of the excitement going on there at that time, and then a bunch of research on the Nazis during the early years. it's still 6 years before the war starts, the time of this action. So it, is particular things happening during that time. In 1933, in particular, when he first came to power, there was a ton of stuff that happened that affects not only Marty but everyone who lived in Germany.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, so I hope that like all historical writers, you aim for giving a really sound basis and some interesting facts, but not overwhelming the reader with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that was something that I wanted to ask you about the settings like you choose. You know, how does how do those settings impact your story, if they
Mhm.
do at all?
Well, I think with Clean Kill, the setting being Olive Street House, the halfway house, um, that informs everything. Just as because the because it's set there, the whole theme of recovery kind of permeates the book without, I don't think, without being preachy. I
Yeah.
tried very hard to
Y-
not be preachy at all.
You were not.
Yeah, good. So that really informed, and more so than most books I write, I think. I set a lot of books in the Andersonville neighborhood of Chicago, which is really a wonderful, fantastic neighborhood that's about 2 miles south of where I live. And I'm there all the time. So it's a neighborhood I'm comfortable in, that I know well, and is incredibly queer friendly. So in that sense, it supports my characters.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
yeah, so the old adage of write what you know kind of comes in with that.
Yeah.
And then the setting in Sparrow's Nest, the Berlin book, is obviously, Berlin is everything in that book.
Yeah.
It really doesn't even talk much about other parts of Germany. It's really what's exclusive to Berlin.
Hmm. So does the story kind of build around the city then? Like, um,
Yeah, I mean, I have Marty go to quite a few different places in the city to give a good sense of it. And then the city just being characterized by, the Weimar Republic years, when everything was very open and democratic and free and easy. And then the huge contrast between that and the shutdown after Hitler comes into power, the shutdown of all civil rights and freedom of movement and thought and action and speech, is just such a stark contrast to earlier.
well, uh, um, you did all this research and you saw like you read about this shift really in culture and freedoms, and do you see any correlation to actually what is going on in the states today?
Yeah, I think the
Totally off the
move
book
toward
subject, but
yeah, well, I think the move toward fascism that we see as the book progresses from 1929 to 1933 is something, that kind of authoritarian government is something that, many of us are concerned about in the country today. And, particularly if Trump were to be elected, how autocratic would the government become? How many of our democratic freedoms would be, chiseled away?
mm-hmm.
It's really, I'm desperately afraid of what might happen. And I do think there's a correlation. I didn't actually intend that, or that wasn't a motivation for writing the book, but
Mm-hmm.
it's clearly applicable.
Yeah, yeah. When you said that, I was like, wow, that sounds like what's happening, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it could be as stark as what happened in Germany, because we have a much stronger democracy than the Weimar Republic was. And in that sense, it would take some doing, but the table is set for that to happen.
Yeah.
And, whether it be a little at a time or all at once. The happening of it is the horror.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Huh,
Hmm.
scary. Um, wow, so Sparrow's Nest really, I can't wait for that to come out. That sounds like a really exciting book.
Thank
Um,
you. Yeah.
do you have any kind of publishing deadline for that right now? Um,
I'm not under contract with this one with Sparrow's Nest, and I am going to try to get that out into the mainstream.
cool.
We'll see. I have no idea what it takes really to get an agent to take you and a publisher to offer a contract,
Hmm.
because it's just remains mysterious. There's some alchemical formula that seems to happen that I don't know if anyone really knows what it is. It's just some of it is luck, some of it is, of course,
Hmm.
fine writing, some of it is who reads what you've written, is all kinds of different things. So my intention is to be published in the mainstream, and I'm fairly hopeful. I think it's a book that has wide appeal. And now it's still a queer book, and
Hmm.
the first third of it is fairly queer.
Hmm.
And, I think publishing has come a long way
Hmm.
from the time when I published my first book in 2008. I mean, it never occurred to me to try to get it in the mainstream at that point because the wall was so high.
Yeah.
So I went right to a wonderful queer publisher who I've been with ever since, Bold Strokes Books. And now agents and publishers say they're very interested in queer content, and I think they are taking more of it. I do think the kind of the reality that they don't, as of yet, queer books don't necessarily sell as well as non-queer books.
Sure.
And that's always the first consideration for publishers. How much is this going to sell?
Yeah. But I agree with you. I think it is more mainstream than we actually think it is. I would say probably about once a month or so, I receive an email from a mainstream publisher who would like to, get their author on the podcast.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, so it's I was shocked the first time it happened. I was like, oh, hey,
That's great.
yeah, yeah. This is
Yeah.
so yeah. Definitely, if you want their names, I'll give them to you. But yeah, I think it's absolutely possible, especially with the depth of the book. Um, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and here's the fact, you and I and everyone else have been reading straight literature
yeah,
all our
it's
lives,
true.
right?
Yes.
And I think the heteronormative society has steered away from queer books because it feels alien to them. And what straight people do is sometimes alien to me
Mm-hmm.
as well. But
Mm-hmm.
I like to read good literature, and there's much of it to be found um, in the mainstream world. Well, there's much of it to be found in the queer world too. So hopefully that hesitancy that a lot of people have about reading queer characters will slide away.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely think it will. Um, if we keep going in the direction we're going in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Have a bump in the road.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Well, I hope so as I start, sending my manuscript around. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so I want to ask you, do you go on like literary pilgrimages or retreats, that kind of thing to, hone
Mm.
your writing skills? And do you think that's helpful?
I'm big on writing retreats. I've always gone to them since I started writing, and I just love them. And for me, I can get a ton of words down when I'm on a writing retreat. And the retreats have taken on different characteristics. And I would say in the first 10 years of writing or so, I went to established, organized writing retreats where you'd be there with other writers in various circumstances. I mean, I've been to Ragdale, which is up in Lake Forest, and you have a private room in a big old house and you have communal dinners. I've been to the Vermont Studio Center where you have a smaller room in an old house, and then you have your own writing studio in a different building. And all three meals are communal in this barn-like structure. And it was all very cool.
Yeah.
Um, in the last few years, I've done my own writing retreats where it's just me. And I've gone away for I used usually it was always a month that I'd go away for, and I loved that. It really gives you time to sink into just a different way of living and featuring your writing above all else. Now I tend to do more like 2 weeks at I have a place I go to in northern Michigan, which is actually it's called Labris. It's a lesbian resort, and it's really just four cabins on a piece of land on a lake. But I love going up there. I go up there in the winter, and it snows and it's beautiful. And yeah, I really like my retreats.
Wow. That sounds like idealistic or something, you know?
It does,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was made possible by me changing careers like around the year 2000. I became a real estate broker. I had been a law firm person, and real estate brokers have a little more control over their time.
Mhm.
So during the slowest part of the year, which is usually December, that's when I would generally go on my retreats.
Nice. Nice. That's really unusual to be able to take a month away and really
Yeah.
focus on
Oh,
yourself. Yeah.
I know. And isn't it what all employed people dream about?
Yeah.
Like, just get me away for a month, I'll be a different person.
Yeah.
And it is something about that length of time that does make a difference. Yeah.
Definitely, I concur. I used to work in higher ed, and I had summers off, and
Hmm.
it was just so nice. And you came back to the academic year, and you're just refreshed and ready to go and
Right.
energized.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I miss those days sometimes.
Yeah. I can't speak more highly about them, and I think they've improved my writing.
Great, that's
Yeah.
awesome. That's
But they're not places where you are in workshops or taking any kind of instruction. You're
mm-hmm.
strictly on your own.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's no one there like giving you feedback about your work or anything.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's all self motivated.
Oh, that's great. So you
And
really
they
have to be
always say that if
disciplined.
you're sorry.
You really have to be disciplined.
Yeah, right. Well, and they also say if you sit around for a month reading novels, that's okay too. But I would shoot myself if that's what
I know.
I was
I feel like I
doing.
wasted all that time.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Oh boy. Um all right. So I think I had another question for you about your storyline, but I think you answered that about you don't really outline, do you? Like to some
Yeah.
degree you do, but you're a
Well, with
combination.
Sparrow's Nest is the first book where I did a complete outline from front to back. So
Really?
I knew basically everything that was going to happen. And of course, changes are made along the way. It's not, it can't be a rigid outline, but it made a big difference in how I wrote. And um, I think it helped the tightness of the plot line by outlining it. So I probably have converted to an outliner, plotter, and will continue to do that. I mean, my one of my earliest books was called Veritas,
Yes.
and it's a dark academia kind of book
Hmm.
set on a college campus. And in that book, I didn't know what I was doing. I was a brand new writer. I just didn't know what I was doing, and I got three-fourths, maybe more, through the book, not knowing who the bad guy was. I mean, it was crazy. I was starting to panic. It's like, who amongst all these people can it be in a way that makes sense and
Yeah.
is possible? And one day it just fell into my head like magic. It just dropped into my head, and I said, "Of course, that's who it is." And it was actually a brilliant solution. But I'll never do that again because that was too harrowing. So now, so since then, I've always known who the killer was and basically how it would end. But I've taken, as varying degrees of outlining to get there.
And when you say outline, when I think of outline, I think of A, capital A, this happened, and then is that
Yeah.
how you really outline it, or do you just kind of put bullet points?
Bullet points
Okay.
is how I do it. And, maybe later I'll go and refine it by grouping those bullet points into chapters. And to try to, kind of get a feel of where the chapters lie and how long the chapters are. But yeah, it's just bullet points, one thing after another
Hmm.
in its rawest form.
That
And then actually my writing group looks at that
really.
and gives feedback on that. Yeah.
Wow. That's
Mhm.
that's great. I'm like envisioning that, and I just think about like I do that for work, right? Like if I
Mm.
have to write something for work, I'd use these bullet points and then just expound on those,
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
It really worked for me with Sparrow's Nest.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um all right. So, Clean Kill is out and it's available through Bold Strokes Books, or wherever you buy your books. Um,
Actually, yeah. Well, I was going to say it's not actually out now, but by the time this is aired, it will be out. And yeah, you can get it at boldstrokesbooks.com
okay.
or anywhere you buy your online books, and it might be in a few stores. We're working on that. It's
Okay.
certainly in my hometown bookstores. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I would hope
Yeah, it'll
so.
be widely available.
So, and you can buy that in book form or in ebook, correct?
Correct.
All right. All
Yep.
right. And I got to tell you, listeners, it's a great book. You're going to really enjoy it. I highly recommend it. So I hope you
Thank
all.
you.
Yeah, no. Thank you. I'm looking forward to the next
Great.
Nikki Sullivan book.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that might be within 2 years. Sparrow's Nest, I hope to get out in the world sometime later this year.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be great to see too. All right. Well, I think that is about all the time we have for today.
Okay.
Anne, do you have any parting words for our listeners today?
Well, wow, that's let me think. Well, I mean, of course, I would love it if you read my book, and I love hearing from readers. You can go to my website at annelaughlin.writer.com and read a little bit more about me and my books. And there's a contact page as well. So
Awesome. Awesome. And listeners, Anne is a wonderful writer. She has quite a few books already out on the market, and check them out. I think you'll enjoy them. Again, that's all the time we have. And I'm Anita Kelly. Thanks to Anne Laughlin for being with us today. And thanks for joining Liz Talk About Books, baby. And until next time, may your journey be lighthearted, peace be plenty, and be safe out there, folks.